if you can start to learn how to give emotionally intelligent feedback to your workforce, right? Use words like, "Hey, I appreciate, your ability to objectively consider everybody's perspective in your analysis." You don't ever have to actually talk to your workforce about what is EI, what isn't it, because that's another big myth. You build this culture through feedback, through praise and constructive criticism that is grounded in those facets of the EQI model. Take those 15 competencies and start building some feedback models, and you'll start building an organization that's going to foster those behaviors.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you.
EQ Gangsters, I have got a super duper high speed, low drag, air cooled, belt fed, Teflon coated lady for you all today. She is bad to the bone. I have been stalking her, professionally stalking her for however it's been a couple years now, at least. And super excited. I got Sarah Spradlin here. I'm going to read off some things, her bio to you all, just so you guys kind of have an idea. First of all, like a quote that I pulled from her bio, I thought was fire. Your people are your competitive advantage. And it's funny because I literally just got done with one of my client engagements, a group coaching session, and I poked them on that point because none of their KPIs reflected that. I'll leave it there. After nearly 10 years as an active duty Marine Corps officer, she transitioned to serve as the first director of administration, manpower planning, and workforce development at United States Marine Forces Special Operations Command Marine Raider Training Center. Through these experiences, she found her purpose and developed her passion for IO psychology and specifically the power of emotional intelligence. Over the years, she's learned that change is the only constant. The ability for an organizational resilience and the ability for an organization to fundamentally establish organizational resilience and maintain the competitive advantage during times of uncertainty begins by growing an emotionally intelligent workforce driven by emotionally intelligent transformational leaders. Yes, emotional intelligence is not a mutually exclusive skill set. It is a theme, a thread that builds a foundation to help develop every other complex human performance outcome. And then her company, Vitruvian Advantage, they offer integrated talent management solutions to help you establish and maintain the competitive advantage in today's industry. And like I share with you on the polo too, Sarah, I think EQ is one of those force or combat multipliers in competitive advantage as a leader, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So stoked to have you, Sarah. Hit me with how did you become to be this superstar leader, influencer, impactor that you are today?
Holy moly. Well, Noble, thank you. Thank you for having me on today. It is great to see your face, great to hear your voice. I love our Marco Polo back and forth. This is fantastic. I appreciate the compliments that you're putting forth up front. I think my journey really in this field, it really flourished when I was working at SOCOM as a GS. You're talking about working with the elite of the elite. You're talking about individuals who are, it's the full scope level of, high performing teams. It's not just one thing, it's everything. It's the cognitive, it's the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the social. Collective rock stars that I learned so much from.
And
And
real quick,
yeah,
for my civilian audience, SOCOM is Special Operations Command, which in the military space, that is literally the NFL of the military. Just to kind of give the civilians kind of in terms of these are not just athletes that she has worked with; these are NFL athletes, professional athletes in the military space. So that's great. Thank you. Keep going.
yeah, that's a good analogy. And I mean, just to watch the evolution of an organization from its infancy to grow into a powerhouse of an operational organization and component within Special Operations Command was fascinating. And really inside the scope of my journey, to watch these individuals who are being assessed and communicating for what right looks like on all these different levels. And as I'm watching it, you start to kind of see that there is this beautiful and brilliant set of dichotomous skills, right? Things that are like, you have to be a leader, a really good leader, but you have to be a really good follower. And you have to be, a great listener and be able to be really like actively present. But you got to be able to stand up and take charge and speak in front of a crowd. So this beautiful and brilliant, very robust set of dichotomous behaviors that collectively we were looking at and saying, this is what right looks like to hire, develop, and retain the best of the best inside the best of the best. And through research and journey academically and socially, what that really looked like to me was it looked like emotional intelligence. It looked like this was one of those places, a decade plus ago, where we said, hey, we got to be able to be incredibly physically fit. We got to be able to run fast, and we can measure all these things. And we have to be really cognitively intelligent, right? Crystallized intelligence, fluid intelligence, all of these things. These individuals are incredibly intelligent. But then there's this other pot, and it's really kind of this messy, non-fully objective way of looking at this dichotomous set of skills. And that really set me on the journey to say, I think what we're really looking at in terms of quote unquote hiring right the first time, developing skills that are going to build resilience, bring in individuals and train them to a standard that we can say, hey, this is a predictor of future performance, not just current performance, right? So as change is the only constant, we say change is the only constant. And as change is the only constant, we know that if we can bring individuals in that have this concept of emotional intelligence, no matter what change comes their way, new leadership, new processes, new procedures, geopolitical landscape, whatever that looks like, they're going to remain productive, effective in all these categories because they have this foundation of this, adaptable behavior in terms of emotional intelligence, especially recognizing that, all the sciences will teach us that emotional information influences every thought we have, every decision we make, and every action we take. And when we take that as that like baseline, it's like, holy cow, if emotional information is really driving not only every thought, decision, and action I take, but the thought, actions, and decisions that everybody around me takes, then it sounds to me like this concept of applying emotional intelligence and shaping it, and then in turn layering that with emotionally intelligent leadership, building emotionally intelligent organizations, seems like creates a pretty fundamental, rock solid basis for us to establish, resilience as an organization. So that's really where I kind of catapulted from in this EI journey.
Love it, love it, love it. So what? Okay, so here's how I'm going to ask this one. What are some things? Let me ask this one instead. What are some themes, some EQ themes that come, say, standard, and that's, I know nothing comes standard because everyone's different, but just conceptually here, what comes standard from an EQ perspective in high achievers, in these elite performers? Are there some themes, some EQ themes that, okay, there's 90% of high achievers have these EQ strengths, and then conversely, what are some EQ themes that maybe a big percentage of them may lack in the EQ space?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And that is definitely a blanket question, right? And I think the first thing that we have to appreciate is when we consider the fact that emotional intelligence can be measured and it can be developed, right? So we can appreciate that and table that in as a data point. But we can also approach the measurement and development of EI through two different models. We've got an ability-based model, like an ability model, and then we've also got trait models. And the reason why that plays into this is to appreciate that there is a large school of thought that believes that emotional intelligence to a certain extent is a level or a component of your personality, of your core personality, right? It's, the nature versus nurture kind of concept. And if we appreciate that to a certain extent, like, for example, Noble, you use the EQI 2.0, right? Yeah. So with that, that is I'm going to call it a hybrid version of the like master trait EI, right? P-Trade's trait EI assessment. And so if we appreciate that we are we're bringing forth the idea of emotional intelligence, and that it could be in part a foundational aspect of who we are at our core personality, but then also that it's a set of abilities, right? A hybrid aspect, these abilities that we can measure and develop. I say that because in answering that question, we have to appreciate that there really isn't a 90% of this is what everybody brings to the table, because our personalities are all different. We can have incredibly productively emotionally intelligent leaders who are introverts or extroverts. We can, right? So it really is wildly dependent. However, if I were to answer that question, I would say that collectively, the ability to serve in a adaptable and servant leadership style is really across the board, right? And what do I mean by that? So we have adaptive thought. We have an appreciation that change is the only constant. That we're gonna get hit with things, and we can pivot. We can pivot without spiraling. I think the servant leadership is a big piece of this. It's the idea of there's a certain level of social responsibility, and that's inside of the EQI 2.0. There is a certain level of social responsibility where we're not only here to serve ourselves, but we're here to make things collectively bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, so that we leave it in a better place than we found it. And I do think discipline, and I'm cautious about not using the term impulse control. I do think I do think that the majority of high performers who are emotionally intelligent are very disciplined. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are great at impulse control, which is a whole nother conversation, right? Like they can be very disciplined in a lot of certain areas, but not necessarily wildly disciplined, or excuse me, wildly in control of their impulses. And then I would say, on top of that, the final piece would be stress management, right? Stress management would be a big ticket item. They can adapt, look at things objectively for the most part, and apply some coping skills in order to appreciate that, failure is going to define our successes, and we're going to get through this too shall pass perspective and growth mindset, if you would. So I'll pause right there, because I know that's a lot when we think about like what do they bring to the table collectively with a caveat. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's excellent, and I love the nuances there that you included. And I would agree. I was not a secret squirrel guy. I was a conventional guy, but I have a lot of buddies that are. In fact, this guy is he was in an SF dude, and then at the unit that's where he got killed. Actually, was in the unit. And so I have a number of homies that are elite level professional athletes in the military, and I would agree 100% that with your research based skinny, just for me, it's just been my observations. One thing that I had mentioned to you that I have observed from the corporate side is that, and I've assessed, quite a few, coached quite a few in the terms of probably 300 or 400 executives, and a number of them are not as self-aware as I thought they would be. So I was kind of surprised by that. Have there been any things that have surprised you in working with those NFL athletes that maybe have surprised or gone against what your original hypothesis might have been?
Yeah, I mean, from collectively, they surprise me every day. I mean, in a good way, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. From an assessment standpoint, I'll bring it outside of just the operator or SOCOM out, and even layer it with NFL players. We'll layer it with professional athletes across the board, CEOs. Collectively, there is a ton of research that does in fact support the idea that there is a trend that the more senior that you become in an organization, in an organizational role, that it does appear that you have a tendency, a tendency, it's not never concrete, but to report lower scores on self-awareness, right? And oftentimes empathy as well. And this is a really interesting discussion point, in my opinion, for a variety of reasons. So when we look into the research on self-awareness and senior leaders, big dogs, top level, what we start seeing are things like the value of feedback for individuals who are at the senior levels and in positions of power start to almost become unintentionally manipulated, right? Externally, not intentionally, but in the fact that the more power you have, the less likely people are going to provide you very candid, raw feedback, and the large group of them. The more senior you get, the less people you actually have, quote unquote, above you, and so you're receiving less feedback from individuals in senior positions. This is this is assuming that you're in a position of such. Of course, you've got boards and things like that. So none of this is like hard, solid, this is how it is. But here's the way I see this piece with senior elite high performers, senior individuals who have been in the game for a long time, senior leaders, CEOs. As you have gone through this journey of developing who you are and getting to where you're at, you have received so much feedback from so many different people. And I think healthy senior leaders actually maintain a certain amount of imposter syndrome along with them, right? As they journey to the top tiers, because if they are, if they are kicking ass and taking names, they are questioning, am I doing enough? Am I, they are asking themselves the questions. And so I think the more senior you get, you now have bigger and bigger and more diverse sets of perspectives, experiences, values, all these things that are giving you feedback about who you are as a leader. And I think that there's actually an opportunity for you at times to start questioning, to what extent are you fully self-aware, right? Because you think you realize who you are, but there are bits and pieces where you start saying, okay, well, this has gotten me this far and it's working, but I'm getting so much feedback from everybody, stakeholders, investors, whatever it may be, that I wonder if there isn't a better way, which there's a lot of research out there on assessing self-awareness for senior executives that considers this journey that they took, right? Because self-awareness is not just how do you see yourself, right? There's two archetypes of self-awareness, and it's the internal self-awareness and the external self-awareness. And so it's not just about asking ourselves, how am I doing? What are my values? Do I know all of this about me? How do I feel my feels? But it's also about understanding, how do other people perceive my values? How do other people perceive my decision-making style? And so I think this is a fascinating topic that, for senior leaders with the self-awareness piece, that I don't want to put a bad name on them quite yet. Like I think there's time for us to flush this out, because they're doing something right.
That's great. That's great. And 100%, 100%. Um, and here's another little nuance to throw in this discussion about self-awareness of leaders is that I think would be helpful, which will tie into my next question for you. But the tool of reflection,
Yeah.
if leaders could just make part of their personal leader development, reflection, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever their systems are, I think that could go a long way in helping move that needle into those two archetypes of self-awareness that you talked about. What other tools, and you could either stick in self-awareness or just go broader EI, are there any other tools that you have found or seen helpful or effective to help high achievers increase their overall EI or self-awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. So the self-awareness piece and reflection, let's touch on that. So reflection, wildly powerful. I mean, not only self-reflection, but then getting the feedback. I mean, there's no question. Everybody wants this magic button where it's like, ooh, if I, jump up and down 3 times and spin around on a daily, am I gonna become more self-aware? No, I mean, this is a journey. This is a lifelong journey. There is no easy button. But when we think about how do we go about reflecting in the best way, what we've learned over time and through research is that oftentimes we have a tendency to reflect unproductively. And so what do I mean by that? When we reflect, we as humans who are driven by emotional information have a tendency to ask ourselves the most powerful question, one of the most powerful questions, which is why? Why do I feel this way? Why do I get angry? Why do I, fail to listen or communicate effectively? Why is a great question outside of self-reflection. And here's why. A little play on words. We as humans do not have access to all these untapped aspects of how we think, where we've been in our unconscious. We don't have access to it. All we have is access to the information we know, right? Like if you think about, the known knowns, the unknown unknown, right? Okay, we only have access to what we know. So when we go through this process of saying, why do I feel this way? I'm just going to use that as an example. What we end up doing is we tend to invent an answer that we believe to be accurate because it's based on what we know, and we are hardwired to self-justify no matter how objective we think we are. We're gonna judge this based on the information I have. I'm going to judge my answer in terms of how confident am I that I'm right, instead of really focusing on what is wrong with my analysis, right? Goes back to that hedonic wheel that humans are on. We want to run towards pleasure and run away from pain. It's just, I mean, the brain is powerful. We've all got the same one, quote unquote, the same one, right? And so instead of from a tool perspective and the power of reflection and self-awareness and evolving self-awareness, instead of asking, why do I feel this way? We have to reshape it and start asking what questions. What situations cause me to get fill in the blank with an emotion? So now you divest yourself from trying to almost kind of analyze yourself, and you start looking at things from a little bit more of a 30,000 foot perspective. Think about that duality of self, right? I've got me assessing me. I am assessing me, right? That duality of self. And it helps us kind of divest ourselves of those biases when we're doing self-reflection. So being able to come up with a list of what tools or what questions is a really powerful tool in evolving the value and sustainability and application of reflection.
Mike drop. So the more effective someone can be at almost detaching or creating distance between themselves will help increase their ability to more effectively use the tool and power of reflection.
100%.
Got
And
it.
it's not easy, right?
That's so fire. That is so money. So money, Sarah.
I appreciate that. No, I'll tell you, there's a couple other things in that vein, right? I mean, again, there's no easy button, but there is a litany of implicit bias assessments out there from Harvard, and they're all accessible to the public. And if you just take a little bit of time to go in there and consider, like, hey, these are some of the things that I don't think I'm thinking, right? That metacognition level of thinking about thinking, go in there and take some of those assessments. And I mean, again, all these are self-report, so nothing is saying that this is 100% or it's never going to change, but it gives you a little bit of catalyst of thought, in terms of how do I think about thinking? And is my internal and external sense of self-awareness, do they match? And have those conversations. I always encourage that as homework, because I know that can be a very vulnerable thing for folks to participate in. But I think those implicit bias assessments, there's a ton of value in terms of building your own sense of self-awareness. But I'll tell you, on top of that, outside of just the self-awareness element of emotional intelligence, in my opinion, I am a absolute avid believer in the power of sleep. Everything is, I mean, if we think about the idea that everything that we're doing right now is starting in our brain cavity, that brain, we got to train it, we got to protect it, we got to take care of it just like everything else. And we get wrapped up on the physiology of body and forget the neurophysiology and the value of taking care of our brain. I mean, getting productive sleep is a game changer to mitigate your inability to manage your emotional reactions and turn them into responses. Getting productive sleep is going to really help all of those facets of focus and attention that are more of the mental side, but they translate absolutely into the ability to be present in the moment when you're listening to people and not jumping to solution. Because, man, high performers, we all want a solution. We're all solutioners. Like, oh, you told me something, I just in my mind created a problem and I'm here to solve it. And it's like, whoa, Tiger, nobody asked for help yet. Solutioning is actually a big downfall of high performers who are emotionally intelligent, right? Because they're mad servant leaders. They're servant leaders. They want to help. But that's not always what people are coming to you for. And I'll say, the sleep piece, the physical element of sleep and feeding your brain, not your body, is wildly powerful in the interdisciplinary execution of being an emotionally intelligent leader. And Noble, the final piece that I'll share is, if you're talking senior leadership, right? I mean, and building an emotionally intelligent organization is a whole nother conversation, because it's not just, hey, let's just make all kinds of individual emotionally intelligent leaders, right? Like but if we're talking senior leadership, if you can start to learn how to give emotionally intelligent feedback to your workforce, right? Use words like, hey, I appreciate your ability to objectively consider everybody's perspective in your analysis. You don't ever have to actually talk to your workforce about what is EI, what isn't it, because that's another big myth. You build this culture through feedback, through praise and constructive criticism, that is grounded in those facets of the EQI model. Take those 15 competencies and start building some feedback models, and you'll start building an organization that's going to foster those behaviors. And at the end of the day, the leaders know what their shortcomings are. So if they surround themselves with those people, behaviors are contagious. That's why we call them behavior contagions. Surround yourself with people that are going to fill those gaps, so you can watch them, so you can learn from them, right? I mean, it's a powerful thing. Emotions in general, just being driven by it is just an incredibly powerful tool. So I digress. I got me excited, Noble.
30 minutes of straight steak, lady. I am so stoked. Absolutely can't thank you enough. Hopefully if you're cool with it, I would love to do more episodes with you. This
Yeah.
is incredible. Last thing here, how can we connect with you? How can we find you? How do we follow you? Website, whatever.
Absolutely. So my website is vitruvianei.com. So it's like the Vitruvian Man. We got Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. We can run down that rabbit hole with anybody that would like to, but it's Vitruvian, Vitruvian, and then you're going to add EI for emotional intelligence onto it. So vitruvianei.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Please connect with me, Sarah Spradlin, Spradlin. And I'm down here in Tampa. So anybody that's going to be at Soft Week come May, please hit me up. That would be fantastic. And anybody can reach out to me via email at sarah4spradlin@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. I know you got to bounce. Absolutely appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you, Noble. I'll talk to you soon.